Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Simon and today I'm back with one of my favourite videos to make, one of my favourite videos to watch on BookTube, and that is my best books of the year video. And this is where I get a chance to tell you about the books that have really done it for me this year. And yes, I saved wearing this jumper. I haven't worn it at all. I bought it about 6 months ago for this video. My mother said it is me in jumper form, and I think she might be right. Actually, speaking of my mother as well, the Savage reading prompts have been announced. They're over on her channel, which I will link down below. And that also links into the fact that I really love this time of year on BookTube, where people are telling everyone about their favourite books, where they are looking back at the year that's gone and then they're looking at the year ahead. And I will be doing a video, even though I've done a looking back at 2024 and looking forward to 2025, which I'll link down below, but I will be doing a reading plans video very soon that's more like in depth. But if you want to know about what's going on with cats, the library, stationery, reading, my thoughts on last year, some of the things I'm hoping for this year, then do check out that video in the interim. I have come up with, I tried to do 10 and failed because there were 2 that I just couldn't leave out. However, what was really interesting was, after I think in a recent video saying I'd felt like my reading year was a bit meh, or a bit mid, I think was the term that I used. When I went through all the books that I'd read in 2024 and then made a pile of top contenders of the year, a top-tastic pile as I was calling it, I had 46 books, which out of 118 reads, I think is really good. So I was really chuffed doing that to kind of reframe my 2024 reading. I did then have to whittle down 46. I have done an honourable mentions video on Patreon, and I thought I would tease you with 3 so that partly I could make this my 15 favourite books. The first book that people might be surprised is not in my top of all the year is Orbital. And some people might be surprised because 1, I read it and really loved it. 2, Samantha Harvey is one of my favourite authors. I've read all of her backlist bar 1. And also this was the book winner. This is not the only prize winning book that didn't make my top 12, as you will see shortly, but I did really love it. Then I wanted to give a special shout out to Toward Eternity by Anton Her, partly because, as any of you have been watching for a while, you'll know how much I love Anton. He, I think, is an absolute joy on social media, and I had the delight of after chatting with him for a few years now, I think, meeting him in real life to host his event in London for this book. But I also really want to thank him because this book has led me to considering trying more sci-fi in the future. I hadn't until this for ages, and so I'm delighted that I read this book because it sort of opened me up, as it were, to a lot more possible genres, I guess, in 2025. And then a book that I don't feel like I've talked enough about this year, and I need to look at how there's a few that I haven't talked about as much this year as I would have liked, and I need to work out how to make more videos about them, because it's a weird thing with BookTube. Sometimes I feel like if I mention one book more than once, that's too many times, and there are other books that come to the end of the year and I'm like, why did I not mention that book like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in the year, because I love it so much. What is the book? It is The Lost Love Songs of Boise Sing by Ingrid Posade, which I just thought was absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I'm hoping that this will be on the Women's Prize long list, but maybe making a video about my long list predictions will mean I can talk about some of the other books that didn't make my top 12, but I really loved. So there's those. If you would like to go and see that list, like I said, it's on my Patreon on the weekly Savage Shenanigans tier. Final thing to mention is that whittling down was also made easier in the fact that I don't include more than 1 book by an author. I also don't include the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever in a series. It can only be the 1st. And also this year, I haven't included any short stories, any non-fiction or any poetry, because I didn't read that much of it. And my focus has been novels, really. So that's what I decided to do. So let's get cracking. And first up, in at number 12, is a book that is really quiet and very gentle, but has stayed with me all year, and that is Winter in Sokcho by Eliza Shua Dusapan, and this is translated by Anissa Abbas Higgins. This is set in a hotel, out of season, in South Korea. It is winter, it is snowing, it's not the most desirable place to go. And we meet a graphic designer who's gone there to get inspiration and work. And we also meet one of the members of staff at the hotel, and how this sort of friendship, relationship, bond is built in these strange circumstances, and how they go out and see things together. And this has just really stayed with me. I described it, or have described it quite a few times, as a snow globe of a novel, and that's the only way I can think of to describe it, and that's the real memory that I've got of it. I absolutely loved this, and I read the other two of Eliza's books this year, and had the pleasure of interviewing her at West Kirby Bookshop, and loved those too. So yeah, would recommend, but this has really, really, really stayed with me. And then a book that's probably grown on me the most this year, and you'll see why I've said that, because I think I'm being clever, is The Most by Jessica Anthony. I think it was when it got shortlisted for the National Book Award that I gave it a whirl. I think it was the National Book Award, I'm pretty sure it was. I'd been sent it unsolicited, and so I thought I'll give it a try. And it's set over a single day when there happens to be a satellite with a dog in it orbiting the Earth, although I was never quite sure what that had to do with the main story, which is about Virgil and Kathleen, who are married. She one day just decides to go and sit in the pool all day, and he's off doing other things with their kids. And as they're both going about their day in very different ways, they're thinking about all the secrets that they have kept from each other. And so as the reader, we get to see all the fragments and fractures in their relationship, but also all the duplicity that's going on, how the double standards are, and what might happen going forward. And I loved this. This gave, and I don't know why, because it's not like either of them are like the two leads in Gone Girl, but it gave kind of Gone Girl vibes in the fact that it was very much a thriller in a way about a marriage. I just loved it. I really, really need to read more of Jessica Anthony's books. That was in at number 11, because I now feel like I'm hosting Top of the Pops. In at number 10 is Christos Choks's The In-Between. Now, I read some absolutely incredible queer fiction last year, and there is some more queer fiction ahead, but this, to me, I don't know if it's because I'm not far, well, I'm a little bit away from, let's say, a decade away from the ages of the two main characters in this book, who are both middle-aged men in their 50s. And it starts off with one of them getting ready to go on a date with the other, and then we follow that relationship. And I loved how this looked at desire of bodies, and the shame of our bodies we sometimes feel, both just in terms of like how we have aged, how we're maybe not as trim as we used to be. I mean, I've always been a big bear, nothing's changed much there. I love how it looked at that. I love how it looked at sex in this really frank and gritty and, pun sort of intended, semi-intended, no holes barred way. But also just the love, and the fact that this, I didn't feel was something I'd read before. I don't feel like I read much about middle-aged men suddenly finding love, and also getting their backstories, and how we are the people we are because of some of the awful things we've been through, but also the fact that we carry that with us, and it can make us a little bit flinty or difficult, or yeah, I just think this is so brilliantly done, and one of my favourite, I'm going to say one of my favourite love stories ever, partly because I just think it's quite unusual, and yeah, I really, really loved it. Still don't want my mum to read it because it's absolutely filthy, but at some point she will. But I mean, it's not filthy for the sake of being filthy. It's filthy for the right reasons. And actually, I was just had the pleasure of interviewing Christos, again, at West Kirby Bookshop. And he did write in this book that I was filthy beautiful, which I am going to keep with me forever. So yeah, a really, really, really fantastic book. At number 9, we have This Motherless Land by Nikki May, which is a book that really surprised me. I really enjoyed her debut at Wahala. I think this is next level. This, to me, I don't want to call it, but I'm going to call it, I would like this to be shortlisted, if not possibly win next year's Women's Prize, because I think it is that good. It's a retelling of Mansfield Park. If you've not read Mansfield Park, then don't worry about it. I mean, I've not read Mansfield Park, but I have watched several adaptations, but I still didn't feel like I massively needed it. What this is really about at its heart, for me, is about the love between cousins, and it's how two cousins meet. One who, when the book opens, goes through an absolute tragedy in Nigeria and ends up going to live with her mother's family, who she's never met before, in rural Britain. And this is set in the, I think it's the 60s, 70s, 80s. And so she doesn't get the warmest welcome, even from her own aunt. and her cousin totally like bonds with her. And I love how Nikki May writes about cultures clashing, how they come together, and looks at some of the silly differences, but also those deep-rooted differences, whilst also making a book that's, like I said, just this real love story between cousins, and also is really funny, really poignant, really moving, and at times really heartbreaking. I think it is absolutely sensational, so I was thrilled to read that. Next up, we have one of two books that were on, I don't know why I say it like that, two, like I'm so surprised, but one of two books that were on the Booker Prize shortlist this year. The first of which is The Saf Keep by Yael van der Wooden. I loved this. This has made me want to head to so much more historical fiction, and also so much more post-war fiction. Particularly, I'm not a big fan of World War books. I either like the in-between stages or occasionally post Second World War. This is set in a old big house where we meet Isabel, who is living with a maid who she thinks might be stealing things in the house that her brother will inherit. However, he's off gallivanting, but one day he asks if his current girlfriend can stay in the house with her, and Isabel doesn't want anyone staying in that house. She doesn't even like the maid being there. She's so protective over that space. And I won't say any more than that, but we follow on from when his girlfriend does move in, and this book will take you in directions that some you may heard of, so you might be expecting, but others that you may not have, and so you won't be expecting. But then I feel silly because I've just said you won't expect stuff, which means you're going to be looking for stuff if you've not read this book. Breathe. I thought this was stunning, so beautifully written, and I don't even want to say, but of course I'm not going to say it by default, that I can't believe this is a debut, but I can understand why people were saying that, even though I think many authors have written many brilliant debuts, but this is a sensational novel. Loved it. Keeping in the theme of prizes now, but my favourite book off the Women's Prize long list for 20... I'm just checking that. Yeah, because two of the others that were eligible haven't made it, and then one book that I've got coming up is eligible for next year's. And actually, I would say maybe ties with me as a book that I would love to win the Women's Prize. Anyway, I'm teasing. What is the book that's in at number 7? It is Ordinary Human Failings, and I just thought this was incredible. I wasn't sure it was going to be for me going in. I'd heard really mixed things about Megan Nolan, for that is who wrote it, sorry I should have said that, about Megan Nolan's debut, which I really do want to read, but like I said, heard lots of mixed things about. And I wasn't sure, like, people were saying it kind of was trying to be a crime thriller, but it wasn't really. And there is a crime at the heart of this. This is set on an estate in London in the 1990s where an Irish family have moved there, and they're not really particularly welcome, and there is a death that may or may not have involved the youngest member of that family. The family are put into kind of hiding, really, and it looks at how that whole situation is for them, but then it looks so frankly and unflinchingly at how vile the tabloid press were and still are, and I just think it does it so fantastically. It makes you sort of shudder with ickiness at some of the behaviour of the journalist at the forefront of this, whilst also just feeling so sorry for this family and how deeply unfairly they are treated. For me, this was a real gut punch of novel. I really cared about the people in this, well, not the journalist, but I really cared about the family at the heart of this book, and I'm very excited to head to Megan Nolan's debut and whatever she writes next. I believe non-fiction is next for her. We're almost, no, we are at the halfway point because I didn't do 10. Number 6 of the halfway point is a book that I have Dua Lipa to thank for making me read. It's Bad Habit by Alana S. Portero, translated by Mara Faye Leatham. And I will never forget this book. This was a complete surprise to me, even though a couple of you, to give credit elsewhere outside Dua Lipa, a couple of you had said that I should read this. Again, this is a book that arrived unsolicited. This is about a young trans woman who, at the start of the book, is coming to terms with their gender in this particular area of Spain, where it's very working class. It could possibly not be safe for them to be who they really want to be. And it also looks at the fact that if you are in that situation, you have no one to look up to, no role models at all. What do you do? How do you cope? Where do you go to find yourself through the people who may be your people. And I think the way that this has been written is so powerful, and I just absolutely loved it. A real surprise for me, but one that I cannot recommend enough. And speaking of prizes, which we have done a little bit, I would absolutely love this to be, if it's eligible, I think it is, on the International Booker long list and shortlist next year, because honestly I think this is such a brilliant, powerful, and I hate using this expression as well, important book, but it is, so I've got to say it. But absolutely fantastic, really moving too, quite hard to read in parts. Then on to my fifth favourite book of 2024, which is very, very different, because it's very different in the fact that I don't tend to pick funny books as books that become my favourites every year, but also because it's a book by a man. So that can be quite a shock. As well as the book being really funny though, it's also incredibly moving, and I think the way that this author uses humour to make us laugh and then really shock us or really punch us with an emotional wallop is really, really powerful. This is Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon, and I just loved it. Now it's set in... Is it 500 AD? I can't remember, because I'm not very 412. This is set in 412 BC, and we meet Lampo and Gelon, who are potters, and as the book opens, they've decided they're going to go and give some food to the Greek slaves who are imprisoned in the quarry and being starved to death in exchange for them to perform. And then this big idea comes that maybe they could put on a big show. And as we follow that storyline, we also get to know all the people around Lampo and Gelon. We get to get involved in their friendship, and I love that this book is a brilliant book about friendship between these two men. And there's a kind of love story going on. There's something that's quite supernatural, like sort of suggested in the background. And this book was also super duper duper impactful to me, as I was lucky enough to be reading it when I was in Syracuse, where it is set, and went to the quarry, where I think I cried about 3 times because of having read what the men imprisoned there went through. And so for that, this book will haunt me and stay with me forever, as well as, like I said, it being a real ripping yarn, a real like tale of friendship. And also not just friendship to the two men, there is another friendship that, there's so much in here that I loved, and I can't recommend it enough. One thing I haven't mentioned that I should before I wrap this book up and head on to the top 4 is this is a book that is told in a contemporary tone, whilst it's at the time, but also with this wonderful Irish lilt, and I loved it all the more for that. It was, I don't know, it just seemed so fitting, and I just found it fantastic. A really, really powerful book, one that will haunt me for quite some time, but I have such fond, happy memories of too, as well as all the crying. So we have that. Then at number 4, we're almost at that top 3. Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood, which I'm sure will be no surprise to many of you who have been watching this channel this year, or indeed for, not this year, we're only just into 2025, but who've been watching the channel over the last year, but also possibly before that, because I've been a fan of Charlotte Wood for, I think, about 10 or so years, ever since I first read The Natural Way of Things. This was up for the Booker. This was the one I really, really wanted to win the Booker. I think this is such an incredible book because in many ways it's quite a quiet book, yet there's so much going on and it's filled with so much. So when it opens, we meet a woman who is going to stay at a kind of nunnery / commune where she's not joining the nuns, but she's just there for kind of a retreat. There seems to be something a bit pandemic-y going on in the background, but as we read on, there is a plague of mice. There are some bones found that were one of the previous sisters there that are going to come back, and also returning is a nun who's become quite infamous, but also has links to our narrator's past. And while all that's going on, this book is also looking at shame, guilt, grief, how we sometimes misremember history based on our actions and what we've done to others, and sometimes how that hasn't been received by others the way we think it was, or didn't even become the big deal that we think it was. But also at the same time, it's about wanting forgiveness for what we may or may not have done. And I just think this is absolutely stunning, and I'm so glad I've still got a few more of Charlotte's backlist to go through. If you haven't read this yet, well, you've not been listening to me for the last 12 months, but no. I really, really, really loved it. Do give it a read. I'm not sure when it's out in paperback, actually. In at number 3 is the book I alluded to when I said I had another book that I would be really, really happy if won next. No, it's this year now. This year's Women's Prize for Fiction, the 30th year, and that is Passion Tide by Monique Brophy. This utterly blew me away. Many of you who have been around for a while will know how much I love The Mermaid of Black Conch, and that was the overall winner of the Costas, the year that I was one of the judges for the overall award. So this one I was really excited for. I didn't really know much about it before I started it, because that is my want, and I'm a contrary fairy. I wanted to go in knowing very little other than it was Monique's new book and I was excited for it. And it opens with the discovery of a body after a carnival on a Caribbean island, and it's the body of a tourist, and this sparks a huge movement. And this movement comes about because there have been a lot of women being killed on this island and people have ignored it, and we follow 4 very different women on the island and how they react to it all. We follow some of the politicians and the police there. We follow both the good and the bad, and we get to know all these characters so well, and I was completely and utterly pulled into this book, and it gripped me the entire way through. For me, this is like a top-notch literary thriller, because you are wanting to discover who done it, but also you just get so engrossed about what's going on socially on this island, with the interplay between the different characters, the secrets that people are keeping, and it just looks so much in such a kind of addictive way. It is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah. Right, top 2. Can any of you guess what is in second place? Can any of you guess what's in first? At number 2, and this was number 1 for about 3 months of the year, so I just want to mention that because I do think this is an exceptional book, and this is why I must remember to read more backlist books. At number 2, we have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This has been all over BookTube and Bookstagram this year, and I can completely see why, because it is just phenomenal. It's a book that is so small but has so much going on in it. It's a book that is so open-ended and asks so many questions, yet you just feel kind of, I don't know, I was spellbound by it. That's the only way that I can kind of describe it. It was that mixture of being slightly horrified as you read on, because you're trying to work out what's going on, whilst also just being so drawn along by the writing. I feel like it doesn't really need that much of an introduction, but when the book opens, we are in a cell with a young woman and a group of older women, and none of them really remember how they've ended up here. They have guards around them, but they're pretty much left alone. They're fed 3 times a day. They don't really know what time it is at any one point, and then suddenly everything changes. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say they leave the cage and go into the outside world. I will say no more than that, but this is some of the best dystopic fiction I have ever read. It made me want to read loads more, but I always wanted it to be of this calibre, and this is super duper 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 good. It's the way we then follow these women, and I just thought it was incredible. Phenomenal, amazing. All those words. And they said all those expletives. They're not expletives, they're something else. Anyway, so that is my second favourite book of 2024. So now we're on to my number 1 favourite book of 2024. And I feel quite sad that we've already got to this point, but also excited because I've got a whole year ahead of reading to do this again next year. I feel like it kind of deserves a drum roll, but we're just going to have to make do with my knees. So at number 1 for me in 2024, the top book is, I love a good tease, It's Clear by Caris Davis. I don't believe there is a perfect book out there. I also don't really want there to be, but that's a whole different conversation that maybe at some point I'll do a video on. In fact, maybe with Mum, because we have this debate quite a lot. But this to me is closest to perfection as I have read yet. And here's for why. I really love books that introduce me to a historical moment. It could be a historical event in the UK, it could be somewhere else in the world, but I really love finding out about historical events I didn't know about. That was a very long-winded way of saying it. This is set on a remote Scottish island in the 1840s. It looks at a period in history where land and taking back land became really important. And we meet a man who is out looking after a remote island and a man who is going out there to tell him that he's got to leave and that they want the land back. An incident happens, the dramatic incident, there's one part of it that I think about every time and burst out laughing, because I do love that Gareth Davies has got a very wry sense of humour within her writing. I really, really love that. An incident happens that changes everything, and they forces these two men together, but because there is a language barrier, and the way this book looks at language I think is stunning, there's this sort of miscommunication but also building up of a communication, and that is all I will say. But I love books set on remote islands. Oh, top of everything, I should say, Gareth Davies is one of my absolute favourite authors ever since I read The Redemption of Galen Pike, her short story collection, and then went back to her previous one and have read her novels since. I think she is phenomenal. This is her at the height of her concise, condensed powers, and how she does so much with such a slim book is just, I'm going to say it again, amazing, phenomenal, incredible. My favourite book of the year. I urge you to read it if you haven't. I urge you to read all of Gareth Davies' books because they are phenomenal. And at some point maybe I will do an author spotlight video on her because she's just top of the top. Yeah, I just love her writing and can't get enough of it, and I can't wait for whatever she writes next. No pressure. I thought this was absolutely, I'm going to say it again, incredible, phenomenal, amazing, and I can't recommend you read it and her other books enough. So there we go. That is officially 2024 wrapped, content done, my top 12 books. I would love to know your thoughts. Did you guess what my number one book was? Did you guess what was in my top 12? Was there any surprises? Are there any that you're now really, really keen to get to? Have you read some of them already? Did you read them because I'd raved about them at other points? And how can I mention books that I've read previously, be it recently or way back, more often on the channel? I would really, really, really love to know that. I hope you're all doing super duper well. Like I said, if you'd like to see my honourable mentions video, it is on Patreon, which is linked down below, along with my Instagram, my Blue Sky, my wishlist, and all those other things. And thank you for all of your chats, all of your recommendations, all that good stuff over the last 12 months. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments down below, and I will see you in another video very, very soon. Bye.